Okay, it is Thursday before the Dev one is due, and I'm recording the attendance a little early this week, mostly because there won't be a Learn Together for me to review. I've already been meeting with students for this class and have already seen some really good output. And I really think a lot. I think I've said this. I'm very sure I have to you all about why I feel it's important, and I hope now that you, at this point of having seen this, have been through two of these, that you will see it as well. But I also know that it's not easy. Nothing worth learning ever really is. And like anything in life, as I raise my desk a little bit, is that the thing that you want to do is practice, practice, practice. The more you code, the more you understand it, the better you can express your ideas. So, anyway, that's actually not what I was going to talk about today. I don't know why I started there. It was just what I felt when I turned on the camera this morning. So, I'm sitting here with the calendar that is rolled forward to the end of the semester, therefore May. And I just want to keep this in your head is that our last Dev 2, is due on a Thursday night of the final week of the semester. But unlike this Dev, where you can turn it in on that due date and then have a week to do the code review, that won't be possible in the final one, the final development project of the semester. So I just want to say that so you have that in your brain, have that in your understanding as you look towards the end of the class. And so, given that, right, and given the fact that three dev projects, each amounting to around 16% of the class, it's obviously important, each of them. You can also look at the grade and see how well you need to do on the last one. Most of you that I've talked to in this class are like, yes, grades are important. Also, what I'm walking away with skill is sometimes equally some is important. So, you get the nice thing about having a structure of a class is that based on where you want to end up what you need to do. But there's often, as I alluded to, multiple goals that you have for taking classes like this. So, keep that in mind as we roll towards the end of the semester. So, what I want to do is just briefly take a look at, we are going to cover two more sections of this course. Okay. So, we're going to cover, in this case, the expanding, or actually, sorry, 10 and 11. So, advanced objects and functions and asynchronous. Two really, really important topics in JavaScript. So, your week 13 Learn Together is the first time, and I just have to say this, I'm not sure why I need to, but is that I have run previous semester code or Learn Together videos and code because there was a lot of different reasons. I reviewed it and I'm like, you know what? It's fine. Yes, I could have done some things differently, but overall it is fine. But it's the idea of advanced objects. We actually get introduced to this concept, and I want to set this in your mind so you kind of get this, because we do it also. He does it in section 11. So 10 and 11 are similar in this respect. He will introduce the concept of advanced functions in terms first of function constructors. And we've seen how to make objects and how to write methods, functions on objects. So now we're taking it to the next level. So at the very first part of this, the part you're going to see in the beginning part of week 13, and then we'll finish it up in week 14, is really then once you learn that syntax, we're going to do the next evolution of it, which is a full-blown class implementation using the class keyword. And I talk about in the Learn Together for week 13 kind of why that was true, why JavaScript ended up coming up with this, because function constructor, the way the syntax has been done in most of the past of JavaScript, has worked fine. And it really is basically the same thing as a class. But the reason I like that he covers them is in your future coding projects, there is a really good chance you will see somebody using a function constructor and then maybe also a class in another project. So I like that he shows both, but because once you understand the concepts, it will start to make sense. And again, these are not completely new concepts. We've been learning them already, and I've noticed some of you, and I can't point to right who it is they're still writing their code in this object way. So this is taking it to the next level and making it much more functional. So, having said that, we see the same thing in week our section 11, which is the last section of the course. And it's really talking about the idea of asynchronous JavaScript because most apps of any kind will store the user data out on the cloud somewhere. And part of that data, part of that interface may be making a call to some kind of data server, making an API call, if you've heard that, right? So Google Maps comes to my mind as the one first off the top of my head, but there are so many examples. So much of what we do in coding, not just in JavaScript, but in Python and many languages, is we're making a call to an API. We're hitting a URL. Sometimes we call them endpoints. We're requesting some kind of data. So we might be passing some terms that will query against some data and return something back to us that we then handle. So in week section 11, we cover this kind of like we did in 10 where we got introduced and then we changed the syntax, but it was the same thing, right? So we handle them with callbacks, and then we handle them with promises, and then we handle them with async await. So I just want you to understand that as we go into it, because it may feel kind of like, well, why didn't you just teach me the last way rather than the other ways? And honestly, the truth is, because in your coding future, you will probably see different implementations of these concepts. So having said that, one thing I do with the last dev for this class is I usually tell students, and I'm still probably going to do this, but this is your opportunity to help me shape this course. And I know it's a little hard because maybe if you don't have the experience that we're talking about that you're going to gain, it's hard for you to give that, but you can still give me your thoughts about this. Like I generally tell students for your last dev, you could either take what you learn with classes ultimately and convert your dev one into a class implementation of that concept. The other thing is, or you can take what you learned in section 11, asynchronous, make a call to an API, and then do something with presenting that on the screen. I actually did this last semester with COVID data. Is I hit an API endpoint for COVID data, and I then used a library called D3, which is a very, very popular charting presentation library for JavaScript. And then I put that data into a chart. So, that's your second option is you can make an API call that you then do something with the data, present it in some way. You don't necessarily have to use a library, but making the end call and handling what comes back is the other way to do it. So, or come up with something based on, one or both of these concepts that you would like to attempt as well, right? So I'm always open to having conversations because you have your ideas about what you want to, maybe projects that you'd like to extend your knowledge base with. So that hopefully sets the context for the end of the semester. So just to review, the last dev has to be done the code review by the due date, which is the last week of the semester. So make sure you're planning accordingly. We have two major topics that we're finishing up. They but they introduce the concepts in one way and then they change the syntax, but it's basically the same kind of functionality. And that you can think about how you want to approach dev to your last development project. So the other thing is that for the Learn Together, I decided, because I kept the content from a previous semester, that I moved away from stimulus, which some of you may be like, yeah. And also, I do a minimum implementation in the browser. It's more understanding the syntax. And I haven't actually released my code yet, meaning I haven't done a reply with mine in it. And again, the idea is that you do your attempt at my challenge, what I'm giving you, and then, after you've submitted, go look at mine or somebody else's and look at the different ways people approach these, because I'm actually throwing down a challenge of something a little more, he's going to do hangman, which I think is good, right? But there's this way of programming, this function constructor and ultimately class was used in so many different contexts. So we're really building objects that simulate the real world. So that's your kind of set for the end of the semester. Now that we're at this point post Dev 1, although we're not yet. And the thing that we learned, that somebody asked me, I think it was Pamela, if you don't mind me saying Pamela, and expanding our JavaScript knowledge, was really about the use of the try catch and when should you use it, right? So definitely, and I think I saw this in Andrew's code, is that and I didn't even talk to him about this, but and I think this is part of what Andrew showed, was the idea of when you're reading from local storage, that's a great time to do it, because something could happen, right? And you could throw an error and then handle that by returning like an empty array. But it's kind of like, could you use it everywhere? Sure. Anytime you do any kind of calculation, you could do a try catch block. But you think about it too in terms of the more important things that you do. There's a way, but it's really just error handling, right? And we've learned different techniques for error handling in this class. Whew, that's a lot. Maybe it's a lot. I don't know. Is it a lot? So, anyway, have a great week. And I hope you enjoy the Learn Together this week. And I'll see you next week. Peace out.